Hi there, and welcome to the Surviving and Thriving in Residency podcast. I'm Charley Lowry, your host and director of GME Relations at PracticeLink. This show is all about exploring the world of graduate and undergraduate medical education. We'll dive into the real-life experiences, successes, and challenges faced by medical students, residents, and fellows, while also highlighting valuable tools to support you, whether that's financial planning, student aid, or the many free resources provided by PracticeLink. If you're thinking about med school, currently studying, or deep into residency or fellowship, this podcast is here to offer insights and support to make your journey a bit easier than those before you. My name is Charley Lowry, and I'll be hosting today. And today we are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Mary Alice Noel, and she is in Medical Corps Recruiting Integration Officer with the U.S. Army Medical Recruiting Brigade. That's a mouthful, and I hope I got it right, but welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to get a chance to speak with you about Army medicine.
Yeah, I'm sure that our listeners will have a lot of follow-up, I hope, with this. I hope it helps anyone listening who maybe is thinking about a medical career, maybe thinking about medical school, or might have an interest in the military, but maybe just give some really good, useful information today. So I just wanted to talk about your background a little bit. What made you decide to be a doctor would be my first question.
It started for me before I could write. I knew at a young age that I wanted to be a doctor. I don't have physicians in my family, and I think the idea of service appealed to me at a young age. And there's a story I like to tell, or that my parents like to tell, that my brother and I, who's only 18 months younger than me, who's actually in the Army also, marched in one day and announced that I would be delivering babies. And then my brother said, and while she is sleeping, I will be delivering babies at nighttime for her. So that is where I think it started. And then that passion stayed with me throughout high school, and I always just saw my future as being a physician. And so that led me to thinking about how I was going to do that. And certainly medical school is expensive, college is expensive. And my parents were both in the Army. I was not an Army brat, but my dad retired when I was about 5. And so we didn't move around a lot, but the military always had a positive relationship with me in the sense of it was an opportunity for adventure, working with people you would never meet, in your life if you weren't in the Army. It's how my parents described it. And so when I had the opportunity to visit the United States Military Academy up at West Point, then I found out that they actually had a path for people to go to West Point and then go to medical school directly after. And it all clicked for me at 17 that, okay, well, being an Army doctor sounds like an amazing career because it's tied to service and something bigger than yourself. And I still get to fulfill my dream of being a physician. And so, yeah, it started at 17 for me in reality of starting that path.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So medical school, where was medical school for you?
I chose to attend the Uniformed Services University of Health Sciences in Bethesda, Maryland. So it's America's medical school. It trains Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, and public health service officers to be physicians, and it is an accredited U.S. medical school. But the difference is that we have faculty all across the United States, and we do our rotations in military hospitals.
So that's U-Shoes, right? That's what they call it?
Yes, U-Shoes or USU.
Yeah, that's actually where my sister went as well, who's in the Air Force. So she absolutely loved it, had a great time there. So, and how was medical school? So as far as looking back, what were the biggest hurdles maybe, or any advice that you could give just generally for medical school?
Medical school is hard. It's just hard. And looking back on it, I really didn't know how I studied, if that makes sense. Like, I think there were courses at West Point that I took that you could kind of game to get a good grade, and you might not fully understand the material. Well, when it gets to medical school, you have to understand that material, and there's no gaming the system because this is what you're going to do, and this is what you need to know. I think that knowing how you study is extremely important, and it took me struggling through my first semester to realize that sitting in lecture was not necessarily how I learned the best. And so I ended up listening to recorded lectures while I could take copious notes. And so I basically rewrote my pathology textbook during my second year of medical school, and I started performing a lot better because I was now putting myself in situations where I would really learn the material. And then I also encourage people to just hang in there for the non-patient facing times, because it's just part of the process is you got to learn the basics before you move on to be interacting with patients. But once it came to getting to now finally interact with patients as a medical student on my clerkship rotations, that's where it really all connected. All the work that you had done for those 2 years leading up was now paying off because you got to interact with people at the bedside, and it was so fun to start clerkship rotations. So hang on if you're there. Doing your late night studying, or memorizing things that you don't know if it'll matter or not. I promise it matters because it gets you there. And so making sure you have purpose and passion behind what you're doing every day. It's hard to maintain. So you need that support system. And I think that if you're thinking about going to medical school and you have options of where you go to the place you're going to be the most supported, because you need that support ultimately to make it through, because it's not just you, it's you and the people around you who are helping you get through it.
That's great advice. Yeah. I'm not sure that there's any way of preparing people for studying during medical school. It's a totally different ballgame, I think, for most folks. You're used to, even in undergrad, just kind of memorizing things to get through the moment, right? It's never going to come back up in life. But medical school, it's a little different. You need that knowledge ingrained in you, right? So a little different study habits there for sure. So tell me about the rotations. How about third and fourth year, your clinical years, as far as military goes? Where all did you get to go? Did you do a lot of rotations around the country, or?
I was pretty split half and half during my third year. And so now USU offers a different style of curriculum. So they actually start their students rotating at 18 months in, which I think is awesome. And I would have loved that. And they also do modules that are kind of all connected around cardiovascular system instead of just having separate classes for pharmacology and pathology. I think I was part of one of the working groups when I was at school about them changing the curriculum. And I'm so glad that they're doing that now and are offering that. But I started my third year. I went to Washington State, a little south of Seattle at Joint Base Lewis McChord to do my peds rotation. I was at the old Walter Reed for psychiatry, which dates me because there used to be separately Walter Reed Medical Center and then Bethesda. And so I was there before the merger of it becoming Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. I rotated down in Florida at Eglin Air Force Base for family medicine. That's what drew my heart to family medicine, was that experience. And I still stay in touch with people to this day who are residents when I was there as a student, who drew me into the joys of military family medicine. And I got to rotate in Hawaii. So you can obviously see where my passions lie. It was near a beach. So because there's a lottery system by which you select your rotations. So I'd say about half in DC, half on away rotations. And then I got married in between third and fourth year of medical school. My husband was an infantry officer stationed down at Fort Benning, now Fort Moore, Georgia. So I was able to do some of my rotations kind of closer there in Georgia at the hospital that was there. And then I went to the flight surgeon course, which was really cool. That was at Fort Novosel, Alabama, formerly known as Fort Rucker. And so just got some great opportunities to do things I wouldn't have done otherwise. So it was great. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds very, very, very much like a lot of fun and very exciting. Yeah. So very different from a traditional third year rotations, for non-military student.
I tell the students when I'm speaking to them, because either way, like USU is fantastic. There's only so many slots in that school, right? So don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you're wanting to do military medicine, consider all the different options. There are also some very military-friendly medical schools that are out there. For example, even at Mercer in Georgia, they would send students who are HPSP to come rotate with us during their clerkship rotations. So there are other schools that offer those options. And you kind of have to be ready to be a nomad. If you're going to go to USU, you just have to kind of be prepared for that lifestyle. I didn't have children then. I wasn't married during my third year. And so that, I think it would have been looked a little different if I had had kids during that time.
Sure. So then you move on to residency. Tell me a little bit about residency and where that was and how that works for you as a member of the Army.
Sure. So I'll first start with how you get to residency, which is through the military match. And so the Army has its own match, its own pool of about 400-ish students who are in their fourth year medical school, and they are separate from the civilian match. The Army match happens, the window opens in July. You submit your preferences by October in a computer system that's very similar to the civilian match. And you're going to rank order your specialty and where you want to go. And then the program directors meet at a conference in November, and then in December, which is tomorrow, the match results are coming out for the Army. So I'm so excited for my future colleagues who are going to be joining into residency programs. So they find out in December. The civilian match is in March. And so that's one of the differences between the match of the civilian versus the Army. The Navy and the Air Force also have their matches at the same time as the Army. Some programs have both Air Force and Army residents, or Air Force, Army, and Navy residents. So it's all kind of happens at the same time. And so they'll find out in December where they're going to go. And so I ended up halfway through my third year of medical school, decided that I wanted to go family medicine. As I alluded to earlier, I was at an Air Force program that was at a community hospital, and their residents did everything. They were on labor and delivery. They were on inpatient medicine. They were interpreting EKGs for other services and for inpatients who were admitted for surgery. And I fell in love with that. And I didn't think I would. I thought I wouldn't enjoy seeing clinic. It just seemed slower paced and maybe boring at some point. But what I found is that the relationships that those Air Force physicians had developed with their patients was just such a remarkable relationship. And the fact that they had the ability to connect their patient to health and to wellness through different modalities, whether that's talking to a dietitian or getting them involved in behavioral health or referring them to orthopedic surgery to see, is it finally time to just get a knee replacement because you've been dealing with this for so long. So that opened my eyes to family medicine. And so I ended up choosing family medicine. Thankfully, the man that I was to marry was willing to go to Fort Moore, Georgia, Fort Benning for his assignment. And they had a program there. So really a boy took me to South Georgia for family medicine. But I want to say that I would have chosen it anyway because it was a community hospital. I loved labor and delivery, and they ran their labor and delivery. So I want to say that I would have chosen it anyway because of that community hospital feel. It was very intimate. You knew all the different doctors in the hospital. And as a resident, you could call the dermatologist. And sometimes they would say, yeah, bring that patient up here. And if you'd have time, you could take that patient up there and then learn or do a biopsy with the dermatologist. And so that was a great 3 years. We started our family. I had my daughter in my second year of residency and my son not long after I graduated. So that was challenging to be pregnant in residency. But I tell people, don't let the Army or medicine dictate when you're going to start your family, because your family is going to be there long after you take off your white coat or your uniform.
That's great advice too. Yeah, that's words of wisdom right there. Yeah. So what about looking back on residency? How was transition from medical school to residency? How was your first year? Walking in that first day, we always talk about, when I talk to residents, I like to talk about first year for a lot of reasons. For civilian residents, a lot of them tell me how lonely it is because they're studying, they're working, they're just really eating and sleeping and working and studying. That's it. And that's their life. And a lot of them are away from family and things like that. And then the other part, of course, is the anxiety of walking in there and it's on you now. It's not a book anymore. This is real life. They're standing in front of you, right? Treat me. Here's what's wrong. So it's just that whole anxiety. So how was that for you, the transition from student to resident?
I tell students that I talk to now that I think that is the big transition in your professional identity formation, because you are now part of a team sport. Because up until starting residency and walking into that hospital for the first day, it's been about you and your performance, and you're transiently part of these teams that care for patients, but you really aren't part of the team. And now when you enter into residency, you are a member of that healthcare team. I liked that. I really liked that. And I found community there. And so you speak to loneliness, but I would encourage people to look for your community that's there. Build that family. I think that's part of the Army culture too, is that just like, we're just all here together to work towards a common purpose, right? The uniform puts us towards the common goal of defending our nation. In Army medicine, you're there to care for your service members, your retirees, your beneficiaries. And so I would say look to your left and right and find that community. And it could be, though you're living, breathing, sleeping, eating at the hospital, do that with people. And I am a super extrovert. So that also, like, if you're an introvert, sometimes that's a little bit of a stretch. But try to find people to eat with. You could eat with your nursing team. Like, you can get a chance to be and commune with. One of the things I loved about residency, that when I look back on, some of my fondest memories were the weekends and nights where you were there. And like I said, I'm a community hospital. So there was about 3 or 4 of us in between the inpatient service and labor and delivery. And we would find each other, in the middle of the night to talk and commune, because it was mind numbing sometimes to just sit in the room, writing your H&P for that patient you just admitted, knowing there's 3 more in the ER, but then someone would bring in food or something. And so, some of my fondest memories are of those times where even though you're in the hospital, you make the most of it because you're there with your peers and you're going to help each other out. And you go through some really sometimes really super tragic situations. And as you think about going into those situations, you know that it's coming, right? You know that you're going to have some hard experiences. And that might be today. That might be tomorrow. We had a baby die on Thanksgiving of my second year of residency. When I came back, my daughter was like 2 months old at the time. And so that was like a really, really hard day. And what gets you through those things are, again, the people around you. And I think there's only so much you can do internally, right? Like you can breathe, you can do mindfulness. Those things are all very important. But I think we are on this earth to be with each other in community. And so finding those people is really important to get through those super hard times.
Yeah. That's so true. Very, very true, I think. And something I usually tell residents or that we talk about a lot, I travel a lot to residency programs, and it's easy to think I'm only here for 3 years for residency and then I'm going to be gone. But your thought process really needs to be from day one, I'm part of this community now. Even if you're there for 1 year, 2 years, you're still part of that community. So find people, whether it's spiritual, whether it's maybe mind, body, spirit kind of thing, right? Find a
your
gym.
Workout groups, your gym. Yeah. Like I think there's a ton of community to be had in gyms. And sometimes you don't want to hang out with all your medical people like on the outside. So I know our residents in the past, like you can be part of like a sport or something that's external, but some type of community.
Find your pickleball team, right?
Yeah. Yes. That's the thing now. Yes.
That's the thing.
We play
now.
Frisbee at Fort Moore every Tuesday. Frisbee. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good outlet.
Physicians, have you finished training and now you're job hunting? PracticeLink.com's Resource Center is packed with free tools to help. From creating your CV, interview prep, and even tips to ace that site visit, we've got you all covered. Visit PracticeLink.com's Resource Center today, and while you're there, create your free account to connect with employers and view exclusive job opportunities.
So let's talk a little bit about the military, the benefits of being in the Army for medical students, residents, fellows, or even physicians who may be listening, civilian physicians who maybe thought about the military at some point, and it's not too late.
It is not too late. It's the number one question I've been asked so far at conferences is people walk by and they're in their 40s or maybe in 50s and say like, I know I'm too old for this. And I say, are you? How old are you? And we have granted waivers up to the age of 67. And there are people out there who have always thought about being part of the military and it's just never worked out for whatever reason. And those people still have a chance to join through active duty or reserves. And there's a way to still benefit your country. And I encourage those people to really think about it because you have this whole slew of residents in Army graduate medical education who need your experience from the outside world. What is life like on the civilian side? What was it like to own your own practice or to, have been in residency when there were no work hour restrictions? Like those things are all important. So I think one of the things that you get from being part of the Army is, I've alluded to earlier, you are part of a team. You are part of something bigger than yourself. And it really creates a sense of purpose of why you're there. And I think we have an amazing patient population because you're talking about people who have volunteered, less than 1% of the United States population, people who have volunteered to sacrifice their livelihood, their lives, their ability to keep their kids in the same school year to year, just to serve their country and defend their country. And I was in during the whole global war on terror. I deployed to Iraq in 2019. That's an amazing population of people. To walk into your office for a cold or for knee pain, you get the opportunity to take care of them. And that is very fulfilling. So I think that aspect of giving back and serving is certainly a benefit. There are financial benefits, absolutely. But really at the core, I think people who have a desire to serve, I think it becomes very professionally fulfilling to them when they join. And you can pursue the Health Professions Scholarship Program, which is for medical school. We offer the HPSP scholarship for 1, 2, 3, or 4 years. And so it's also not too late if you're even a third-year medical student and you want to get an opportunity to compete in the military match and be in an Army residency program and serve in the Army. It's not too late. You can also join during residency. So we have a financial assistance program where you get a grant of $45,000 a year and you get a stipend every month. And then you serve payback time as a staff physician in the Army. And we have a program like that on the reserve side too, where you owe time to the reserves called the FAP or STRAP. We have lots of acronyms in the Army. And if you want to do a fellowship, people ask, well, how does it look if I'm in residency right now and I want to do a fellowship? If you're in residency right now as a civilian, you want to do fellowship. There's not really a path to doing a fellowship in the Army directly, but you could be in the Army and compete for a fellowship after you join. We have a variety of fellowships available. I have a great PDF that has all the fellowships offered in the Army. And those are either trained at a civilian site that the Army has an agreement with, or you train at an Army facility. So there's a lot of opportunities there as well. So financially can certainly help. There's loan repayment programs once you're in the Army as a physician. And then the reserves offers a whole plethora of opportunities as well.
Gotcha. So what are some common misconceptions of the Army as a medical profession?
One student told me that she was absolutely sure that she wasn't able to live off post. I said, no, you can live off post. You can live off post. You can buy a house or rent a house. Like, that's okay. You can do those things. I don't have to eat in an Army dining facility. I didn't go to basic training. What people envision, down at Fort Moore where I worked, that's where we had enlisted basic training. That's not what you go through. There are some courses that teach you how to wear the uniform and how to march and how to just kind of blend in so you're not so obviously out there not really knowing what's going on, but you're not going through basic training as a physician. So those are some things that people think about. You're not going to automatically deploy. You're not guaranteed to deploy. When I answer questions from students about the deployment, it's like, I have no idea what the world's going to look like in 10 years. We have predictions for what it might look like, but we don't know. When I exited residency, people were more likely to deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan. And now that's not so much the case. We have a field hospital in Iraq right now in Baghdad and some other medical units in that area, but not nearly as much as we had before. So it's really hard to tell what that will look like, but you're not necessarily guaranteed to deploy or on a short list to deploy. It really depends on your specialty and what job you're in. And there's so many factors that feed into whether somebody deploys or doesn't deploy during the time that they're serving.
Mm-hmm. And then deployment, sometimes a lot of the folks I know in the military who have been deployed, that actually turned out to be a big passion of theirs, and they absolutely loved it. So you don't know. You really don't know. I think that sometimes everything happens for a reason, and it's all part of making you who you are.
Yeah, I deployed in 2019. I tell people that it was professionally the best thing I've ever done, and personally, it was the hardest thing I've ever done because I stopped nursing my 13-month-old to get on a plane the next day. I had a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old at home. That was hard. We had already adjusted our family life where my husband had gotten out of the Army a few years prior to stay at home so that when the time came, we wouldn't both be deployed at the same time. But professionally, it was so amazing. I worked in the ER in Baghdad in the combat support hospital, literally in a tent. And we had a hard stand State Department hospital that was next door to us. We used the CT scanner over there. So we would literally put patients on our little gurney and move them over across the little dirt road to get a CT scan and then roll them back because we were the only CT scanner in theater. So if people had abdominal pain, that was probably the most common reason people got evacuated to us. There weren't a ton of trauma injuries when I was there, by God's grace, very thankful for that. But I took care of soldiers from all over the world. I took care of people from New Zealand, from Poland, from Spain. I had a French nurse that I worked with who was embedded with us. And it was an amazing experience and something that, again, yes, like you said, it shapes you. And whether it's a desirable or not desirable, situation as a mom, right? I didn't want to leave my babies. It's what I signed up for. It's when I was 17, I made a decision long before I had babies that I was going to do this. So.
And it's good to be out of your comfort zone. I always think it's good to come back. When you come back, you're so much more appreciative of all the things that you have right at hand all the time. So many resources that we have here that we really don't think about every day, we kind of take for granted. And so when you're practicing medicine without those things, it makes you more appreciative when you come home. So how about residency locations and types of residencies? Do you know geographically how many residencies there are and where they are located?
I should certainly have the number to pop off my head because I have the map in my head. So we have 7 major medical centers across the United States for the Army, and we have residency programs embedded in all of those. And so, you've got Walter Reed, the east side of Georgia has a medical center, San Antonio, El Paso, Fort Liberty in North Carolina, which was Fort Bragg. Sorry, we've renamed a lot of the bases, and so people don't know all those names yet. We have the medical center up in Tacoma, Madigan Army Medical Center in Washington, and then Tripler in Hawaii. I think that covers all of them, but all of them have a robust graduate medical education programs, and it's pretty much everything. So again, I share this PDF that I share with students of this is where we have locations and this is what's offered at those locations. And then we have a few sites like where I trained at Darnell Army Medical Center at Fort Cavazos, Texas has some residency programs. I trained at a singular residency program and at Fort Moore, Georgia. But you can be an Army pediatrician, you can be an interventional radiologist, you can do internal medicine and then become an oncologist. Most of the things you think about, they have training pathways for in the Army.
That's great. Okay. So how about for student loan repayments? If you were a resident, say, finishing up and then you decide to join the military, how does that work with student loan repayment?
So there is a active duty health professions loan repayment program that you sign up for and you owe time. Now, it kind of depends on how you come in. So you may not be eligible to sign for that right away. You might have to serve a certain amount of time before you're eligible to receive that. Or if you got a certain amount of stipend for loans, it might affect how much you can get. But it is an option available even to people who, if they took some amount of scholarship, there might be some additional money that they can get for loan repayment. So,
Gotcha. Okay. How about the biggest challenges that you've faced? I mean, I know, of course, right off it would be leaving your children, I'm sure. But as far as in your career so far, what are some of the biggest challenges?
It's always challenging to uproot, right? It's always challenging to move. As a physician, you kind of sell yourself to that life, in the sense that you don't really choose where you get accepted to medical school. So you're going to uproot to go to medical school that might be away from your family. And then same with residency and then your first job. So in some ways, it's not a huge leap to think about translating that to the Army because you're going to move. And certainly Army medical leadership sees that the more you move someone, the more unstable things are. And it's hard to move, having just moved this summer. It's challenging to move. I have 6 children now. So it was a lot to pack and move. And, the Army pays you to do that, but it's a lot to uproot your children who might be in school. That is hard to now build community, right? We're trying to figure out where we live in the soccer world here in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. So what that looks like for my kids is a big part of my kids' lives. That's challenging. That is a hard thing. You learn and grow, and you certainly learn to purge things, which is good because you can never purge too much. So yeah, that's been hard. And I have been able to make decisions in my assignment process for where I have gone. So another misconception is that you're just going to get an email one day when you're in medical school that says, this is where you're going to residency. Well, no, we have the match process. And then they think, oh, well, I'm in residency. I'm just going to get an email. This is where you're going. There is a conversation that occurs at the beginning of your final year of residency. So if you're a surgeon, your 6th year of general surgery residency, you're going to talk to your program director and your consultant, and you're going to speak with the assignments manager and see what's available and be able to share. My spouse is a professional also, and it behooves us to be close to a big medical center. My parent is ill. I have a family member who has a certain medical condition, so trying to be in physical proximity to them is important. I could have gone to Germany. I could have gotten stationed in Korea. I could have done these really cool assignments. One of my residents who just graduated is now in the Sinai in an assignment for a year. Super cool, amazing opportunities. But I have chosen to stay in rural Georgia. We're in kind of more rural Kentucky because it gets us close to family, and that's important to us. And so I've been able to make some decisions for our family that have kept us where we want to be physically in location. It may not be the coolest place, but family is important to us. So those are hard things. In the Army, you get a lot of leadership opportunities. And that is good and bad because you never feel prepared to take on the next leadership role. And so certainly I've been in leadership positions that I would not have been in this early on in my career. In my mid-30s, I would likely not be an associate residency program director, but I did that job. Super awesome job, but challenging. And you never feel like you have enough skills for what you're being put into. But that is part of growth. And so you kind of fumble through it sometimes. So it's good to surround yourself with good people who are going to encourage you and teach you and mentor you and coach you, which again, the Army is kind of full of those opportunities because when you're in residency, you're going to have faculty who have been there, done that, and they're going to share their experiences with you. And that's why I loved being faculty because I got to share not only things that worked out for me, but also things that didn't work out for me and challenges that I had because we're all people. We all make mistakes. We're human. And it's important to share that because you can't be on a pedestal. There's no such thing as perfection. I'm a recovering perfectionist.
And it's such a good way to give back to the medical community, right? By teaching the upcoming classes. It's good to work with them, and it's a good way to stay on your toes with medical knowledge too, because they're always on the ball.
Yep. Lifelong learner. Family medicine, you've got to be a lifelong learner. If you are teaching residents, you have to be a lifelong learner. And they always bring something new to the table. And I'm just always impressed by like, man, I can't do that. There's so much out there. It's so much.
So now you don't get to work so much with the residents, I guess, because you're in Fort Knox now, right?
Yeah, I'm at Fort Knox. I have some opportunities to go over to the University of Louisville and work with their School of Medicine. So I'm thrilled that might be an opportunity for me. I do see patients at the clinic here. I do travel quite a bit, so it's pretty limited, but I go over and fill whatever gaps are there. So if people need physicals or, they need people to cover down on sick call, I really still love seeing patients. Sometimes that's the nature of your job or the assignment you take that you might not have as much patient care. But I try to reassure people I'm speaking to about HPSP is that when you come out of residency, you have the opportunity to kind of choose what kind of job you go to. At least you can put down your preferences. And so if you want to stay full-time clinical, that's something you can ask for to do. But some of the Army surgeon roles, like being a flight surgeon, you're assigned to an Army helicopter unit. And so you're going to learn a lot about medicine in different ways than necessarily being face-to-face with the patient. You're going to think about safety and risk and how to provide preventive strategies to your pilots so that they're well. And so medicine can look like a lot of different things. It's not always you being directly in front of the patient.
Yeah, for sure.
Physicians, only want to be contacted by recruiters who know your specific professional interests? Simply call and speak with a PracticeLink physician specialist, and we'll help you create your free profile and pair you with only the job opportunities that you're interested in. Visit PracticeLink.com to get started today.
So what about with moving and state licensure? How does all of that work? You're probably licensed in several states, I would imagine.
I'm only licensed in several states because I do telemedicine on the outside. So you actually only need a unrestricted license. So you do not need to change licensure unless you plan to moonlight or do what we call off-duty employment in the state you're in. And at that time, you would need that state licensure. You can maintain just one license. As long as it's an unrestricted license, you're good.
Oh, that's great. So you can moonlight then. That's an option maybe? I don't know.
That is absolutely an option, yeah. Again, it looks like a lot of different things. I've had a neurosurgeon friend who would take a week of like vacation time, but she would go do locums work and they would fly her to where she needs to go because of the demand for neurosurgeons. And so that is also a way that some of the physicians, I would say, again, surgical subspecialties can keep up skills by doing moonlighting. And it's some additional income, which is always helpful. So,
oh, yeah. That's a common misconception right there. I did not know you could.
You cannot moonlight in residency or in fellowship. So you are restricted from moonlighting during those times. But otherwise, you have to go through a process of getting it approved. But a lot of us do that.
Totally understandable. So what about advice? What kind of advice would you give for listeners, for anyone thinking about joining, people in residency and medical school, fellows, even civilian physicians who may be listening or advanced healthcare providers? What kind of advice would you give them? You just seem like you have this great energy. I can tell you truly love your life. And I think that's such an amazing thing because it's so much more than just goals, and it's the whole piece of the puzzle. You're living your best life and you love what you do and you have the passion. And I know there are people out there who have that, but maybe can't afford it. I don't know. But like, what kind of advice would you give them?
The Army takes all comers in the sense of we want you, right? Like we need people. I mean, we really do. We need physicians in the Army. We need future medical students. We need residents. We know that. As a fact, we've done the analysis and we know that if there are major conflicts in the future, we aren't going to have enough doctors. And so that's why the Army said, I'm in my role, not seeing patients every single day in order to help educate people about what Army medicine is all about. And so one, we need you. Certainly there are some qualifications criteria like being physically fit, right? You still have to take the Army combat fitness test. You're not excused from that for being a doctor. I will say that the test, it's challenging, but physical fitness is absolutely key. And we are the worst as doctors telling people to work out and then doing it ourselves. It's hard when you're in residency and you're doing training. It is a lot. You have to be prepared to take that test. And so if being physically fit is important, if you're thinking about it, or maybe you're not really where you want to be physically, and that would be a good start, right? Is just start getting more physically prepared if this is something you're thinking about is on the horizon, because you still have to meet certain standards for height and weight, for the physical tests, those kind of things. So that's something you can't ignore if you're thinking about joining the Army and wearing the uniform. But I would also say get input from the people around you. It's really important for those who love you and who know you and, might be a parent or you might be a child of someone, find out what their thoughts are about it, because you want to have, again, I've talked over and over about the support system that has to be in place. Like, I am not a one-woman superpower. Like, I am a human being who needs sleep and I need to exercise and I need to eat, and I can only attribute my success to the people who I've had around me, especially my husband, who gave up his career as an infantry officer to support our family, that we could grow our family to the size that it is now. My parents have been extremely supportive, my in-laws, and then, just friends along the way. We have a lot of babysitters. Every time we move, we have to build community. So thinking about, like, how would I do that? How would I have myself set up? Because if your home affairs aren't in order, it affects your life. And so you want to have the right, I don't call it balance because there's no such thing as balance. The work-life integration is really what I describe it as, where you will have seasons that are heavier on the work side or heavier on the personal home side, and you want to be able to have the structure to support that. So I think those are important things to think about if you're considering it. And again, active duty or reserves. Reserves is more a weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, shorter deployments typically, and an opportunity to kind of put your foot in, see how it goes. And then if you want to transition on to active duty in the future, there are absolutely pathways to do that.
Anything else you want to add or anything else you want to throw out there before we wrap up, just in general about the Army, or anything else you want to throw in there?
I think people also don't know that in the military, you get opportunities to be on the national stage with your organizations, with your specialty organizations. And so I'm a member of the American Academy of Family Physicians. I had the opportunity to go to one of the national conferences to represent the women delegates of the Uniformed Services Academy of Family Physicians. And it is amazing to see all the people who have been in military medicine at some point in their lives really involved in these national specialty organizations. And so the American College of Surgeons has their own Excelsior Society. There are societies within emergency medicine and pediatrics. And so we have a presence in the national stage, and you're very marketable after you've finished your time. So if you do the HPSP scholarship, you serve your 4 years and then you're out, you are very marketable because you can follow the rules and you are used to resource limited environments, and you have likely had some leadership experiences, maybe even more so than your peers in civilian medicine. And so people are worried, if I train in the Army, am I going to get a good shot at getting a good job afterwards? Yes. And there are people who also will do their specialty and then they will go to fellowship as they're exiting the Army. So I have a friend who's doing a facial plastics fellowship down in Texas, a friend who's in a breast surgery fellowship in Louisville. One of my former residents just got accepted to Harvard to their geriatric medicine residency program. I mean, super competitive. And so I think the Army sets you up to be very competitive for fellowships as well, if that's what you want to do after you serve.
It's very, very, very hot item right now, fellowships. So a lot of folks wanting to pursue that. Another thing that's a hot item right now when I talk to residents is the academics part. They do love teaching. So that definitely sounds like it would be an option in the military as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's how I stayed full scope in family medicine, where I was still delivering babies and still on inpatient medicine, was by being on faculty at a hospital that had a residency program. So there are certainly opportunities. And I teach faculty development for the Uniformed Services University. And so you have opportunities to, if you choose to be on faculty, you have opportunities to get faculty development and learn and grow as an educator as well. So there's a lot of ways to improve in teaching skills and get clinical appointments at the Uniformed Services University as an assistant professor that can translate into the civilian side in the future.
Wow. So I cannot thank you enough, not only for being on the podcast, but for your service and for your husband's service, for your parents' service. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. I would love to have you back on at some time, maybe talk a little bit more about it, and we will definitely be in touch. And if we can ever do anything to help you, please let us know.
Thank you. And I also wanted to share that if anybody has interest, so they've heard this podcast and they said, oh, I want to learn more. There are 500 medical recruiters across the country. And so goarmy.com/amen is the website that you can use to connect with the opportunities that are available. So people can go there to look to see, can they connect with a medical recruiter? And then I'm always open to talking to people about my experiences as well offline. So
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. And thank you so much, and take good care of yourself, okay?
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.